Hello, and welcome so much to our monthly YouTube show. I apologize for any technical errors. Every single person in this group had a technical error, including yours truly. For example, I actually started the live stream for our March 24th YouTube show. So I took a little trip into the future. Good news, everything's good. We're all good. We're all back at work by then. But seriously, I'm so sorry about that. It is December 16th. I know that, and I'm now choosing the right day. So welcome to our monthly YouTube show. We'll tell you what we're reading. Once again, my colleagues and I will be telling you about some of the titles that we've been reading and enjoying, or not, although I don't know if there are any nots today. If you have titles that you're also enjoying, please let us know by including them in the chat if you're watching us live, or comments if you're watching us on demand. Please, you can also join us on Zoom on Monday, December 21st at 7 p.m. for Tell Us What You're Reading to share some of the titles. Many of our titles are available electronically through our subscriptions to Overdrive, Libby, and or Hoopla. My name is Laura Bernheim, and I'm the head of reference at the library. Yes, I actually had to look at my sheet to remember my last name. Joining me are my colleagues Greg Carter, Elizabeth Rior, Louise Goldstein, and Dana Hamlin. We have several events and programs coming soon for patrons of all ages, some of which are on our YouTube channel, which you're watching right now. That's right now. Hit like and subscribe, and check out our events calendar on walthampubliclibrary.org for future programs, including Zoom links and or who to contact. You can watch several children's programs, either live or on demand via Facebook Live by joining the Children's Activities Group through our library's Facebook page. We also have multiple virtual book clubs every month. You can find the meetings, titles, and Zoom links on our website by clicking on book clubs or events, or by liking our Facebook page. Please join us tonight on Zoom at 7 p.m. for Suffragettes in the Closet and Corsets. You can grab the Zoom link off of our events calendar by visiting walthampubliclibrary.org. And once again, but never ever least, please consider supporting and joining the Friends of the Waltham Public Library. We've been able to continue offering library services and programs since March, and a lot of that is thanks to our friends. I know I say this every time, but they actually pay for the Zoom account, which does allow us to do live programming. We really do have the best of friends. Without further ado, I'm going to pass it on to my colleague, Greg.
All right, hello everyone. My name is Greg Carter, resident science fiction and fantasy nerd of the library, though there are more than one of us, and I will start sharing what I've been reading. So bear with me while I set up my PowerPoint presentation. Here we go. And let's see. Sorry about this. Slideshow. Makes sense. All right, so first book I have read. Technically, this is cheating because this was the Science Fiction and Fantasy Book Club of December, but since I read it, I say it counts. I read The Princess Bride by William Goldman, and this is an interesting one because I read this a long time ago. Like last time I read this, I was in high school. Actually, I was reading to my little sister. So it's been a while since I've read this book, and I was kind of worried whether or not it was going to hold up. Amazingly, for the most part, it does. I really enjoyed this. This is, if you're just looking for like high-class fantasy with a nice dash of comedy, this is your jam. I'm also kind of surprised on how faithful to the book the movie was. It's done in the same sense of where William Goldman, who you might know from being the writer of All the President's Men and Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, wrote this book, and he gave credit to, and I don't know if I'm pronouncing his person's name, S. Morgenstern's, as the author. And so when you're reading the book, it's done kind of as a sense where he's a kid who's sick and his dad's coming in and reading him the story. And then it will sometimes jump back to him talking to his dad about what's going on with the story and what elements are happening, or how he skipped a boring part, or how he's, or like something that really hit him, or even a part of the story that he found out later about. It's an interesting dynamic, and it takes what could have been a rather just your typical fantasy story, although admittedly a very good fantasy story, and I feel like it gives it something else. I mean, I'm a little biased towards this book because, namely, it was the book that made me realize that romance novels can in fact be awesome. And I honestly feel like this is what, if Jane Austen and like John Cleese decided to write a book together, I'm not sure this is what it would be, but it could come close. There's a lot of comedy to it that I get a kick out of. And my one regret is that if there's one issue I have with it, it's that I kind of wish that Princess Buttercup, who had a little bit more agency, but she's not a flat character either. So if it's not 10 out of 10, I give it a 9. Because apparently I'm rating books now. So onward to the next one. You're going to notice a theme. The Hobbit. So hands down, this is kind of the thing that started it all. I pretty much reread this book like every December, sometimes twice a year. This is the book that really made me a nerd. One Christmas, my dad got me a book, and I was like, a book? What are you doing, Dad? And he said, read it, you'll like it. And I have to give the old man credit, but I did. And I'm a science fiction librarian now, so there you go. I was a little surprised on how short it was, because I remember this being like really, really long when I was a kid, but it's actually, and I actually had this as the science fiction and fantasy book club for 2019 choice, and I was a little intimidated by it, but it's actually under 300 pages. So I'm a little surprised about, maybe it was just something as a kid, I thought it was longer. It's a straightforward fantasy story. I kind of feel like if you're just getting into getting into fantasy, this, in my humble opinion, is required reading. It's not the end all be all, because the genre is way more than that, but long story short, it's about Bilbo Baggins, if you don't know, the most famous of hobbitses, and he pretty much just goes on a quest with 13 dwarves to slay a dragon. So, beginning, middle, and end. I loved it a lot. And I think Tolkien does a really good job with it. So now, because I've talked about two like high fantasy novels, we're going to go back, of course, we're going to ruin it all and just go into something a little bit darker. The Last Book on the Left by Ben Kissel, Henry Sobrowski, and Marcus Parks. So this is a nonfiction book. Suffice to say, if you don't know who these three are, they do this podcast called The Last Podcast on the Left, where they're like three guys who just pretty much talk about the urban legends, serial killers, pretty much all the spooky, dark stuff that has happened in the world. And they do research about it, or more accurately, Marcus Parks does the research, and Ben Kissel and Henry Sobrowski pretty much drink beer and just interrupt him numerously with crude jokes. And I'm not insulting those two because they flat out admit that. So in this case, this book is pretty much just takes, this looks at, several serial killers that have unfortunately dominated the headlines, and they look into research of them and try to find out their motive, who they were as people, and their ultimate fates. So you've got people like Jeffrey Dahmer, John Wayne Gacy, and Ted Bundy. This is not something I usually read. I love I love horror stories, but I tend to stay away from, actual real life horror, because people being awful to each other is just not something I usually, it's not something I like to read. I mean, the world's just, we know that it can be messed up as it is, so I would not like to look into it. So it really goes to show how good of a writer, at least Marcus Parks, is when it comes to describing and going into the backstory of it. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's pretty grim. I mean, you're talking about serial killers, so it's just, you can get to some like really dark stuff, and they sometimes make very, very crude jokes, but amazingly, they are somehow able to give a lot of, at least my humble opinion, like respect and acknowledgement of the suffering of the victims and how they did not deserve this, and ultimately how pathetic these individuals are in causing these horrific crimes. Also, it delves into some unfortunate aspects of why these people were able to get away with it. Like, for example, Jeffrey Dahmer, the reason he killed 17 people, and one of the reasons he was able to is because he preyed upon like minority groups and people who would often be ignored by law enforcement, unfortunately, at that time. And it delves into like why this occurred. So surprisingly, I found it a fascinating read. I don't think I'm ever going to read it again, and I want to warn you that this is some heavy stuff. Finally, last but definitely not least, or maybe it is, I don't know. David Wong's "This book is full of spiders. Seriously, dude, do not touch it." So the best way I can describe this novel is, well, I guess if Jay and Silent Bob were in like Stranger Things or Twin Peaks, that's kind of what this book is about. There are these two guys named David and John, and they live in a place called undisclosed. And in their words, this town is not so much haunted as it is infected. There is something. There's just something really wrong with the town. There's messed up stuff that's occurring. And unfortunately for the town, these two losers are the best thing they have to heroes. And they're definitely not heroes. They're pretty raunchy and sometimes downright stupid. Unfortunately, they are dealing with, in this book, what they're dealing with is, invisible spiders that apparently can infest your brain and make you into like walking zombies that try to spread it. Or as I'll read like a little passage from the book, warning, you may have a huge invisible spider living in your skull. This is not a metaphor. You will dismiss this as ridiculous fear-mongering. Dismissing things as ridiculous fear-mongering is in fact the first symptom of the parasitic spider infection. The creature secretes a chemical into the brain to stimulate skepticism in order to prevent you from seeking a cure. This is just as well, since the cure involves learning what a chainsaw tastes like. So they pretty much just have to deal with like a zombie spider infestation. And, I love the premise of this. The execution is a little sloppy. It might be just, it's a little too weird for me, which is really saying something, because I can tolerate a lot of weird. But if there's one thing I will give it credit for, is that in times of crisis and, madness and monsters, ultimately human ignorance and hysteria is ultimately what's going to be the major casualty. And keeping a cool head and having empathy for your fellow human being might be what gets you out of there alive, which I think is something that, it's a moral I can respect. But unfortunately, I didn't like it as much as I thought I would. But in any case, that's the end of my rant. Thank you for putting up with me. And I'm going to introduce my wonderful colleague, Louise. So thank you.
Well, thank you to my wonderful colleague, Greg. My goodness, what a collection of titles. I had spiders in my house once, and they scare me. I know they're beneficial insects, but they scare me. Anyway, as you guys can see, Laura is kindly sharing my screen because my computer sort of collapsed today. So here is my first slide. This is a really, really, really good book that I recommend highly. If we were going to do the 1 through 10 system like Greg was talking about, I would give this a 10. This is The Orchard by David Hopen. Perhaps inappropriate, I have to say this author is incredibly handsome. So if you get the book, you'll see his photo on the back cover. I also have to say this author went to Yale undergraduate, went to Oxford for a master's degree, and is currently getting a law degree at Yale. So he's a real slouch, you can tell. And he started writing this novel apparently when he was in high school. Just decided to write this novel. This is a very interesting novel, a very unusual plot. I have a note there that I think fans of Donna Tartt would like this novel because the first book I read by her was The Secret History. I have since read The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt, and she is a very excellent writer who knows how to write about intellectual people and sort of what happens when they kind of have an experiment that sort of goes wrong, and disturbed intellectual people. And this novel has one high school student in particular who's rather damaged and very intelligent. And our main character, a boy named Ari Eden, he started out in, Laura can tell you, I read a lot of books about very religious Jews, usually in New York, and some who leave the fold, or sometimes people who are not religious and they join the fold. I find this topic really interesting. So in this case, our character Arya, his father loses his job in Brooklyn, where he went to a very traditional Talmudic school. And Ari was actually rather bored and unhappy with his life. He wanted to read more secular fiction. His mother was not raised in the secular world, or his mother was raised in a more secular world, but became more religious. And she did take him to the library, and he was very interested in books. So when the father loses his job, they move to Miami, and they move on to this block that they have a nice house, but across the street from them is a huge house. I kind of pictured a huge McMansion, but that's not really the description of it, but a huge house with a very affluent family. And Ari befriends the boy across the street who's the same age as him. They're both in high school, whose name is Noah. And he ends up going to the school with these sort of wealthy Orthodox, but much more secular Orthodox people. And he gets into this crowd where they are very intelligent and they like to party hardy. And he is not used to that lifestyle at all. One of his friends, they have kind of philosophical discussions, a lot of talk about what is a tragedy? What is a tragedy really? And this novel is a bit of a tragedy. I don't want to give away what happens, but it goes sort of spiritual, it goes sort of philosophical, it goes secular, it goes spiritual, it goes in all kinds of directions. There's a love interest, which is always nice. Very rich novel. Some critics feel that the females in the book were mainly love interests, and they write that as a negative part of the book. But I didn't feel that way. I felt like the one woman was developed, two of the women were developed very well. And I felt like we were focusing on these boys and their friendship. And I think that it's normal when there's sort of a group of boys to sort of have boy focus. So I didn't feel that way. I really like this book. It is not an upbeat, lively, funny piece of chick lit by any stretch of the imagination. So if you're looking for light, funny, escapist reading, this is not for you. But if you love Donna Tartt like I do, and you like books that are kind of creative and characters who are complex, this is the book for you. Okay, this next book, again, if I'm going with the Greg system of 1 to 10, this book is a 10, perhaps a 10.5. This book is so good, and it is such a book for our times. Leave the World Behind by Rumaan Alam. Oh my God, this book, whew. First of all, oh, by the way, I want to say the book before this, The Orchard, and this book, in both cases, we have first novels by the author. And so Leave the World Behind, no slouch, finalist for a National Book Award, among other honors that it's received so far. This author, okay, this is kind of a dystopian piece of fiction, all right? But at the same time, the author writes with such wit, and we are dealing with issues of not the pandemic, but issues of life now and the sort of the unpredictability of our world right now. The president in this book is Donald Trump. He is the president. And so it's a modern day novel, and we have this sort of upper middle class couple with 2 kids. The older boy is 15 and the girl is maybe 14. Archie is the older boy, Rosie's the girl. And they're going on a vacation to rural Long Island, you know, somewhere around Montauk from Brooklyn. And they're very excited. Amanda, the mom, got them like an Airbnb fancy dancy house, and they're very excited when they see the house. It's so nice. It has a swimming pool. It has a hot tub. It's beautiful. They're excited to be there. Vacation, yippee-yi-yay. Mom goes shopping to buy all the groceries for them. Everything's looking rosy. But the owners of the house knock on the door, and they are Black, and the owners say there's been a power failure in the whole, like all around the neighborhood, and they need to come stay at this house, at their house. And Amanda and Clay, who are kind of like liberal, feel alarmed and are thinking, how can these be the hosts? You know, they're having a sort of a guess who's coming to dinner kind of a response, and they're trying to act polite. And anyway, this couple who own the house end up coming in, and it turns out something horrific is going on out there in the world. And it's dark. I'll give you that. It's dark, but it's fantastic. And there's a sort of a wit about it, even with the dark happenings that are going on. There are times when the author takes us sort of outside of what the characters know and tell us some things that are going on in the world beyond that they don't know, because their whole internet goes down, and they are not able to do anything with their phones or anything like that, but they are able to use the lights, because for some miraculous reason, the power didn't go out in this one house. And anyway, great book. Great book. I can't recommend it enough. But again, if you're looking for light, if you're looking for funny, not right now, don't read it. It is funny though, even though it's not funny. Anyway, I'm sorry, go ahead. Go ahead. All right, now this last book, again, if we're going 1 to 10, I'm giving this a 10. All of the books I selected for today are books that I think are top quality. It just so happens that this is the book that Laura selected for our book club that's meeting tomorrow night. So I was reading it for the book club. I like it so well that I wanted to share it for Tell Us What We're Reading, because I want you all to know about it. And if you want to cram it in or read some of it before tomorrow, you're welcome to come to our book club. But this book is fantastic. His Only Wife by Peace Adzo Mehdi. This is not a dark book. This is not upsetting. It's not an upsetting book. So if you're looking for a book that's more just a novel that you can sort of escape into another world, this is the one for you, because we're going to Ghana, modern day Ghana. I believe it takes place in 2014. The author started writing it in 2012. She is an amazing person. She has a doctorate in something, I think maybe gender studies, but I have to look that up. But anyway, she's a fabulous writer. The premise of this book is so interesting. She kind of had me like at the first sentence, which goes something like this. Eli Kem married me in absentia. He did not come to our wedding. So here you go. You have this main character. She is getting married, okay? She's going to be someone's wife. The husband is not at the wedding. His brother is kind of standing in for him. Can you imagine? You're getting married. Your husband's not there. This is an arranged marriage. She has not met him ever. She doesn't know him. She knows his family because it's a wealthy family. And the mom, the groom's mom, they call her auntie, and she has done some favors for our main character's family. And she gets married. She gets moved to a very nice apartment complex with her mom for a while. Her mother's going to stay with her. They grew up in kind of in poverty. The dad had died, and so our main character is used to living, you know, in poverty, sharing her bedroom sometimes. Her name is Afi, and she moves with her mom to this apartment that is really fancy. And this is very fancy to them. All the bedrooms have their own bathroom. It's carpeted. It has modern accoutrement like dishwasher. The apartment is fancy. There's a doorman, an elevator. They've never lived like this, ever. It's a whole new world. But of course, who's absent is Eli, the husband. He doesn't show up for several weeks while they're staying in this fancy dancy apartment. So this book is beautifully written. You will love the main character. She is just amazing. She's a strong woman character. Fans of the book Purple Hibiscus, I think, will really like this because we have a very strong female protagonist, and we have a world where there are arranged marriages, where sometimes the husband is polygamous and has more than one wife. In this case, we have a husband who has a girlfriend who they are trying to get him to just come be with Afi. But in the meantime, he has this girlfriend, and he has a child with the girlfriend. And so pretty uncomfortable. And so I don't want to tell you too much about what happens, but it's incredible. It's uplifting, the strength of our main character. And it kind of does talk about gender roles. I think it's very strong on gender roles. And I saw the author being interviewed. I didn't see the whole interview yet, but she talks about how this is not just something going on, you know, here in Ghana, but it's going on all over the place. And she referred to, you know, if you have a woman running for president, look at what happens. You know, people don't accept that idea very easily. And so there's work to do on gender, you know, internationally. So I strongly recommend this book. I couldn't put it down. Thanks for picking it, Laura. And speaking of Laura, the hostess with the mostest, we're going to hear from her next.
Thank you, Louise. And I just remind everyone that this is live television. So I apologize that everyone got a quick glance at our YouTube studio when I was checking the chat. I forgot I was the one doing the screen share, and therefore everybody out in YouTube world would see that. So yes, luckily I have the YouTube up on my phone just so I can check it. And to my horror, I saw that. Luckily, no one saw any embarrassing emails or anything. So without further ado, I will be sharing my screen again. Wait, hold on. No, now I'm sharing my screen. Okay. This is a good technology day for Laura. Yes, it is. All right. So my first book is P.S. I Miss You by Jen Petra-Roy. Earlier during the pandemic, we had posted pictures of stacks of books that the staff were reading. And a colleague of ours added this book to her pile. And what a thrill it was that when we had this picture, which included this book on our Facebook page, we got a lovely comment from the book's author. Authors are like rock stars to those of us who work in library land. So I was just super thrilled, as was my colleague who actually had taken the picture. So her comment plus my colleague's review led me to this book, which is beautiful and very sad, written in a letter writing fashion, epistolary, which I never pronounced correctly, which is why I was not going to say it, but guess what I just did. Evie writes to her sister Scylla after Scylla's parents force her to live with a great aunt when she becomes pregnant. Evie writes about troubles with her parents, as well as a burgeoning attraction to her new friend June. But Scylla never writes back. I can tell you much more than that, and I'm actually still reading it. But this book is very lyrically written, and as I already said, very sad. I mean, oh. Evie is a wonderful narrator, and I get a lump in my throat every time I pick it up. And although you should never judge a book by its cover, I just love this one. I love the butterflies. I love the light blue. I just think it's such a beautiful cover. But don't judge a book by its cover. Oh, come on. What is this? Sorry. Live TV. All right. So our next title is A Promised Land by Barack Obama. I listened to this on audio, and I'm so glad I did, rather than read it in print. It's almost 30 hours long. And at first, when I checked it out on Overdrive, I thought, oh, yeah, okay. I listened to it in 2 weeks. I listened to it everywhere, not just my car. I listened to it in my house when I was cooking, doing dishes, you name it. The narration really makes the book move really quickly, despite really just being a political memoir. No matter what side of the aisle you find yourself, Obama does a really good job at leading you through the processes of a political campaign, as well as policy making. Two topics that could be very dry to some people, and I think print-wise, I think I would have found them dry. His descriptions of political friends and rivals are very well-rounded. He has something positive to say about nearly all of his political rivals, which, if you may have forgotten, I had. Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton were very much his rivals in 2008. I had forgotten, actually, that Biden had ran for president in 2008. And he actually talks quite generously about his rivals on the other side of the aisle, with one or two exceptions. But really just great description, and also funny. I mean, I appreciate good sense of humor, no matter who it is. But that was the humor, I think, also made what could be a dry topic a lot of fun. Next up is Singular Sensation, The Triumph of Broadway by Michael Rydell. I love New York. I think I said that last time. I love Broadway, and I just adore the theater. Theater, and obviously a lot of industries are unfortunately feeling the pains from the pandemic. And this book actually was published right at the start of the quarantine, right around the time that Broadway shut down, as well as all theaters. It's not just Broadway. And this book, though, is a story of the evolution of the Broadway show, specifically during the 1990s and running through 2001, specifically September 11th, 2001. The timing of the publication was coincidental, but the author even acknowledges in his introduction that it is apropos, considering what the theater world, and again, not just Broadway, is going through right now. Theater is really, sadly, in trouble right now because they haven't performed in front of an audience since March. So behind the scenes stories about the productions of Rent, Sunset Boulevard, as well as Disney's foray into the Broadway domination, really, are fascinating and fun. In addition to musicals, I also love gossip, and the story behind the feud between Patti LuPone and Andrew Lloyd Webber regarding Sunset Boulevard is delicious. I had heard a little bit of rumors about Patti LuPone in that role and Andrew Lloyd Webber, and it's great. And I have no idea whose side to take in this story. I really don't. I'm going to take Patti LuPone's because she's amazing. And she did not write Cats, no offense. But so she gets points for that. But that was a lot of fun. Next up is Honey Girl by Morgan Rogers. This book is actually slated for publication in February of 2021. I was able to get my hands on a pre-published copy. And if you look at the blurb at the top, my very favorite romance writer, Jasmine Guillory, likes it. So that alone made me excited to read it. This is a great character-driven novel about Grace, who goes to Las Vegas and wakes up to discover that she has a wife, courtesy of one of Las Vegas's drive-by chapels. But before you say, oh, every movie or TV show ever that takes place in Vegas, I know getting married in Vegas by accident is a trope that's been done so many times in movies and TV shows. I'm looking at you, Friends, specifically. But honestly, it's not what you think. This is not Ross and Rachel. Friends, please don't get me started. But it's done very well here, and it's not your typical sitcom situation. I really like the writing. The side characters, her friends are great. I enjoy this book a lot. But last but never least, I said the Friends of the Library are never least, and that's true, but the thing that's really never least is Chocolate. Chocolate is Forever by Maida Heater. Another book that I also judge by its cover. I mean, look at this, man. I mean, look at that bundt cake. Does that not look amazing? Does that not just make you want to eat this book? Like, the 86 proof chocolate cake, which is in here, is... I happened to have some bourbon in the house for another recipe. I swear it was for a recipe. And was happy to discover the 86 proof chocolate cake where I could use the rest of the bourbon. And since we can't socialize with too many people, it was more cake for me. What a shame, sorry. I'm also really excited to try the chocolate pumpkin cake and the Oreo cookie cake. So those are my books. So without further ado, I'm passing it on to Liz.
Hi, everybody. Patti LuPone didn't write Cats. And I love Cats. Like, I love Cats, the musical. I've seen it live several times. So I'm going to talk about a wide variety of books today that are kind of all over the place. So let's get started. Share screen. Yes, share that one. Awesome. And now we're gonna go into present mode. Beautiful, maybe. We'll see. All right. So my first book is called How to Hold Animals by Toshimitsu Matsuhashi. This book is super cute. It's all about the proper way to hold various animals, both pets and wild animals. So it's got like cat, rabbit, dog, but then it also has like snake, tarantula, sugar glider, stag beetle. It's written by a Japanese author, and it talks a lot about the different types of pets that are available in Japan. I lived in Japan for a year when I was in college, so it was fun to sort of know that, because I had already known, like in Japan, large beetles are a very popular pet because space is at a premium in the large cities of Japan, and beetles take up a very small amount of space. My favorite entry in this book is on how to properly hold frogs and toads, because the subheading on it is Frogs and Toads, some are poisonous, all are handsome. And I agree with that statement. My next book is probably my top fiction book of 2020, Monstre, Volume 1 by Duncan Swan. This is a self-published book, and it is amazing. It had a starred review, and I don't usually read self-published things just because editing is like a thing that I'm really picky about. But this book is so good. I think it's like 350 or 400 pages, and I read it in 2 days. I could not put it down. So in this book, basically, it starts at the CERN labs in Switzerland, like the Massive Hadron Collider, science, woo, atoms. There's an accident and a hole is ripped in the fabric of space and time, and bad stuff starts coming out. It's kind of like a mixture of Stranger Things, The Stand, and The Mist. So you've got sort of 2 timelines in this book. One is what's happening from the moment that accident at CERN happens and what the international response is to what is happening, which is bad stuff. There's monsters, the air that's coming out of it is toxic and killing people. And then it's creating this cloud that's slowly spreading out over the world. So starting in Switzerland, moving out over the world. And then this other timeline in the book is about 6 months in the future from it, from the day the accident happens, I think. And it's set in the United States about a group of people who are trying to get to a safe underground facility so that they're not killed by these horrible monsters and this plague that's been released by this cloud, which you can see in the horizon. And I've had nightmares about this book weeks after finishing it. It was so good. I cannot recommend it highly enough. It's amazing. Duncan Swan, mwah, chef's kiss to your horror writing. My next 2 books are by the same author. They're part of a series. It is the Danielle Kane series by the author Margaret Killjoy, whose name I love. The first one is The Lamb Will Slaughter the Lion, and the second one, follow-up, is The Barrow Will Send What It May. These books are basically about a group of anarchists and punks that fight demons. And the author, Margaret Killjoy, is also an anarchist. She's written a lot about anarchy and in science fiction and in steampunk. She's also an amazing musician. I have like a huge, I'm like obsessed with her right now. She's great. I lost my train of thought. Oh yeah, so in The Lamb Will Slaughter the Lion, basically Danielle Kane, who is this sort of itinerant anarchist punk, is trying to figure out what happened to one of her friends who committed suicide. So she goes to the last place that she knew he was staying, which is this abandoned town that has been taken over by anarchist squatters, basically. And it seems like a really great place, but there's a problem. Somebody summoned a forest spirit that is now killing people, and that's like not a great time. So Danielle and some of the other folks in this this town have to figure out what to do to banish this forest spirit. I love it. It's a novella. It's very short. You can finish it in an evening if you're, particularly focused. The Barrow Will Send What It May, is the follow-up. And in it, we have Danielle and the other folks who she joined up with in book 1, traveling to the Pacific Northwest, I think it is, where they meet a group of anarchists living in a public library. So that also, I was just like, yay, librarians. And they have to fight a necromancer. I love it. It's great. Great stuff. I hope there's more in the series because I really enjoyed it. My next one is like totally different. This is Well Met by Jen DeLuca. It is a romance novel set in a Renaissance fair. So it is like the nerdiest thing ever. Sorry, just give me one moment. Oh, never mind. It's a romance set in a Renaissance fair. The main character, whose name I can't remember because I'm prepared, she loses her job, her boyfriend breaks up with her, so she moves to Maryland to help take care of her sister who's been in a really bad car accident. And her sister has a teenage daughter. So it's the summer, the teenage daughter wants to participate in the local town Renaissance fair. But the caveat is she's young enough that she needs to have a parent or guardian participating with her. Because her mom is still recovering from this horrible car accident, her aunt, who is the main character, ends up signing up to participate in the Renaissance fair with her. And the director of the Renaissance fair is this very dark, brooding, handsome jerk. And it's sort of a enemies to friends type situation. I really loved it. It was very sweet. And like, I'm a total dork. I love Renaissance fairs. I love going to King Richard's Fair here in Massachusetts. There's just something about them that I love them. So it was great. It's the first book in the series. The next one is called Well Played, and I have it checked out right now. I have not started it, and I'm excited. And oh, that was my last book. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to pass it along to my wonderful colleague, Dana. Dana,
Thank you.
I'm excited to hear what you say.
Hi, I'm Dana. I'm going to share my screen real quick. I want to give a little shout out. Laura mentioned that, to us librarians and bookish types, that authors are sort of rock stars. I discovered Matt Haig several years ago when he followed me on Twitter. So I feel like I knew him way back when, and now he's an award-winning, I think he might have already won awards at that point, I don't remember, but like he blew up. So I feel cool by association. All right, so getting down to it. The last book I finished was The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. The book just won the Goodreads Choice Award for Best Fiction, and it also won the acclaimed spot of being one of the 3 books Dolly Parton said she had on her nightstand earlier this month, the others being the Bible and a devotional. Matt Haig is one of my all-time favorite authors, and I've been eagerly awaiting this book since he first announced he was writing it. The Midnight Library follows a woman named Nora who has decided to kill herself. After she swallows a bottle of pills, she finds herself inside a massive library where the shelves go on forever and the time is always midnight. The librarian finds her and explains that the Midnight Library exists between life and death and gives a person the chance to see what any of their possible lives would be like. She explains that every decision a person makes, no matter how tiny, creates another life with different outcomes, and the library has one book for every one of these lives. With the librarian acting as her guide, Nora selects books and tries out different versions of her life, searching for the elusive perfect one where she's happy. Like many of Haig's other books, The Midnight Library has elements of sci-fi and fantasy with a dollop of philosophy, and I loved the premise of an endless library that contains all the different stories one's life could possibly tell. Another book I recently finished is This Light Between Us by Andrew Fukuda. It's a YA historical fiction novel that takes place during World War II. The story follows Alex Maki, a Japanese-American teenager who lives on Bainbridge Island in Washington state. His closest friend is his pen pal of many years, Charlie, a Jewish teenage girl who lives in Paris. The beginning of the book is mostly letters between the two, establishing the characters and showing the deepening of their friendship. And then Pearl Harbor happens and Alex's life is turned upside down. His family is forcibly moved to an internment camp, and though their correspondence slows, he and Charlie continue to write and share what the war is like in their respective parts of the world. I found the characters well developed and relatable, and the descriptions of the Manzanar internment camp and occupied Paris made me feel like I was right there in the middle of the action. As you might imagine, with the 2 main characters being Japanese American and Jewish French, parts of the story are heart-wrenching, and at times it was really hard to read. But I thought it was beautifully written, and it tells stories about our past that, while painful, shouldn't be forgotten. Another recent read that was so good, these are all books that I liked this time around, was The Degenerates by J. Albert Mann. It's a relatively new YA historical fiction novel, and most of the book is actually set right here in Waltham. It follows 4 girls, London, Alice, Maxine, and Rose, who are students at the Fernald School in 1928. For readers who are familiar with the history of the school, the conditions the girls face daily won't come as a surprise, but reading the descriptions is still disturbing, maddening, and heartbreaking. The author did extensive research, evidenced by the substantial bibliography and notes at the end, and the story itself is incredibly well written. I felt like I knew the 4 girls, and when the book ended, I actually missed them, and I wanted to know what happens next in their lives. Finally, popular with my preschooler, is A Sick Day for Amos McGee by Philip C. Stead. I adore this book. I'm so glad my son has been wanting it for his bedtime book lately because it's so sweet and so cute, and I love reading it. Amos McGee lives on his own and works at the zoo. He knows each of the animals and what they're like, which one is shy, which one likes to race, which one is scared of the dark, and he spends time with each of them throughout the day. When Amos doesn't show up for work one day, the concerned animals hop on the bus and go to his house, each taking turns to care for him in their own special way. It's a nice, gentle book. It's great for bedtime and shows that there are many ways to be kind and many ways to be a friend. Basically, it's 2 parental thumbs up. With that, I'm back.
Thank you, Dana, and thank you, everyone. Those all sound amazing. Sick Day for Amos McGee looks adorable. And I definitely, I think since you first mentioned the Degenerates to me, I definitely want to check it out, especially since part of it does take place at the Fernald, which just closed not super long after I started working here. So it would be very fascinating to read that. And Louise, thank you for touting our book club tomorrow night. We are meeting at 7 p.m. Regardless of the snow, which is, the one nice side effect to everything that's going on right now is I think we've really discovered virtual programming in a way. So we never have to cancel book club again, which is great. I'm really glad about that. And Liz, as you know, I have Well Met at home in my to be read pile. And again, not judging a book by its cover, I love that pastel green. I don't know why, but I'm very interested in reading that. And Greg, I know it's not possible without a time machine. I know I talked about the time machine at the beginning of this presentation since I accidentally turned on the March 24th presentation, but I would love to see Jane Austen and John Cleese co-write a book together. I'm very curious how that would turn out. John Cleese has been, I'm less thrilled about him than I used to be, but I think he and Jane Austen would be a really fascinating team up. So I'm very sad that short again of a time machine or somehow bringing Jane Austen back to life, that will never happen, and that is a bummer. So very quickly, we are coming close to 3:30. Does anyone quickly have a show or movie they'd like to share they've seen? Liz seems super excited to do so. Yeah, just real quickly, tell us what you want to share.
Okay, I'm gonna be super quick. So there is a new show on Netflix called Auntie Donna's Big Ol' House of Fun. You can borrow a Roku from our library with Netflix accounts on it. So if you don't have access to Netflix another way, you can request them, give us a call. They'll put one on hold for you if you're a Waltham resident. It is an Australian sketch show. And it is completely bonkers. It is so weird. And when I put it on, my husband has to leave the room because he's like, it's too weird. There's just screaming and Australian accents and puppets and more yelling, and it doesn't make any sense. And there's wigs. It's so good. I've just been watching it on repeat. My friend and I are hosting a binge party this weekend, using the Netflix watch feature, so we could just watch all of it. The episodes are very short. They're about 24 minutes. There's 6 episodes. There's a lot of cursing, definitely not appropriate for children without parental supervision. But I mean, raise your kids how you want. They're not my kids. Do what you need to do.
Thank you, Liz. I will definitely have to check that out. Maybe this weekend if there's still some snow on the ground and we can't really go anywhere. Oh, we can't go anywhere anyway. So that sounds super fun. Anyone else have a real quick capsule thing they want to say? Yeah, great.
Yeah, just quickly, also on Netflix, I don't know if I'm getting the title wrong. There's a TV series called Movies of Our Childhood that kind of look into movies of, from the past and just the making of it. The one I recently watched is Elf. And here's the thing, Elf I like Elf. Elf's a good Christmas movie, but I'm more fascinated by the creation of it because when you think about it, that is a movie that should not work. I mean, if somebody just flat out told me Will Ferrell's in an elf costume and he just walks to New York City to meet his dad, who's played by the same guy who was Sonny in The Godfather, I'd just be like, and Zoe Deschanel like falls in love with him. You're like, this shouldn't work. And Roger Ebert also said that. He's like, this shouldn't work, but somehow it does. And it just goes through how it all kind of went together. And it's just like, I'm just watching it like, oh, yeah, I guess. It's just fascinating to me. I mean, again, it's just a good behind the scenes thing. Like it, it's a good movie, but it really shouldn't be, but somehow it is. So just give it a watch if you want. And I think there's like a sequel, Nightmare Before Christmas, movies of our childhood. Haven't watched that yet, but that must be cool too. That's what I got.
Are you talking about the movies that made us? Is that the show you're talking about?
That's it. My bad.
That's a great show. I haven't seen the Alpha. I've seen the Dirty Dancing episode, which I was 12 when that came out, and it was really fun. I was a little disappointed because they didn't interview I assume they tried to interview everybody and they weren't able to. I realized Jerry Orbach and Patrick Swayze are no longer with us, but I want to watch the Elf episode. And you're right, I never thought about it, but that movie should not have worked. Yes, go ahead. You're on mute.
Almost forgot one thing. Yeah, sorry. The boss of Buddy, Will Ferrell's character, didn't realize he was Ralphie in From a Christmas Story. So that kind of, I might have screamed "what" at that and got my wife angry at me. But in any case, that's all I got.
I love A Christmas Story. Anyone else, real quickly? No. I'll go ahead.
Can I say one other thing?
Yeah.
So if you have access to HBO, there's a show called How To with John Wilson that is basically just a man who films everything he sees in New York and then creates a little storyline around them. And it is amazing. It's one of the weirdest things I've ever watched in my entire life. And I have watched like a lot of weird things, like a lot of weird things. So good.
Thank you. That sounds interesting as well. Yeah, I just real quickly, I finished Star Wars: The Clone Wars. I think I mentioned those last month. I have been avoiding this show a lot. I'm a Star Wars fan. I don't love the prequel era movies. I've still seen the prequels several times because I somehow delude myself into thinking this time is going to be different, and it never is. I ended up watching the Clone Wars because I've been watching The Mandalorian, which I like, and there have been a couple of characters that were in the Clone Wars and Rebels, which I did watch that a little. I really liked the Clone Wars. The animation is not great. It gets better throughout the shows, but I finally finished it. The last season, the last 4 episodes are amazing. They take place at the same time as Revenge of the Sith, and really are just so well done, so gut-wrenching. Again, I really think it develops a lot of nuance to the clones. There's this one character, Rex, who I love him, and I love his relationship with Ahsoka Tano, who was introduced in The Mandalorian. Was reintroduced, in The Mandalorian, and I really enjoyed it. And because of that, I rewatched Revenge of the Sith since it took place simultaneously. I still didn't like it. I thought maybe I would appreciate it a little more. I didn't really, but teach his own. Some people like the prequels, and no judgment at all. But I appreciate the era a little bit more now. I'm also just, speaking of HBO, I've been watching a second season of His Dark Materials based on the Philip Pullman trilogy, His Dark Materials. They are now, season 2 is basically What Was the Subtle Knife, for those who read the books. There's a lot of differences, which is fine. They've really gave a lot more character development to some of the adult characters, especially. I'm enjoying it. I've forgotten a lot of the books. I read them several years ago. I have been reading his new trilogy, which takes place in the same world. But I'm enjoying it. I'm not loving it, but it's I think the child actors in it who play Will and Lyra are amazing. So and it's fun to see Lin-Manuel Miranda in a I just love him anyway. I wish he'd be singing, but his character doesn't sing. So all right, so without further ado, thank you to my colleagues and thank you to all of our listeners and watchers. Just a reminder, you can watch us on demand. This will be available forever on YouTube. I don't know how I feel about that because I feel like I was not on my game technology-wise today. And again, I apologize for the late start since I apparently thought it was March and not December and clicked on the wrong YouTube video. We are on this channel again in January. I believe it's January 26th, again, 2:30. But again, you don't need to watch live. And if you would like to discuss books with us, Monday evening, December 21st at 7 p.m., the Zoom link is on our website. And again, if you would like to discuss His Only Wife with us, we are meeting tomorrow at 7 p.m. The Zoom link is also on our website and our events calendar. And that book is actually available on Hoopla. So you can check it out without a wait right now. So thank you and wave goodbye, everyone. Bye. It's like the end of the date. It was the dating game. No, they used to, never mind. Bye. Sorry. And